Welcome to the Enlightened Anatomy podcast, where we take a deep dive into the worlds of anatomy, physiology, and science to help you feel more confident and inspired as a yoga teacher. Now, here's your host, Matthew Hui.
Hello, and welcome to the Enlightened Anatomy podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Hui. I'm so happy to be starting this podcast because I myself have gotten so much out of podcasts. I think it's amazing that you can pop those earbuds in your ear or listen in your car and hear interviews from literally anyone in the world. And that is exactly what I want to bring to you, particularly for yoga teachers, to help you understand science better and become better and more confident yoga teachers. Because there are many conflicting views out there, as I'm sure you've noticed. You might hear on one blog post how you should engage your glutes in a back bend, and then another blog post will say you should not engage your glutes in a back bend because it'll compress the lumbar spine. Well, which one's true? Which one's right? Or you might have heard things like in warrior poses, the knee should be over the ankle, or the knee should be slightly behind the ankle, or in front. Which one is the right one? Is headstand dangerous, or is it the king of all asanas? If you're a yoga teacher who wants the latest science-based knowledge on yoga, this is the podcast for you. And by the end of this very first episode, you'll have some scientific truths that will already help you be a better teacher. So, as I mentioned, I'm Matthew Hui. I've been teaching yoga since 2005. I'm the co-author of the book, The Physiology of Yoga. I have a bachelor's degree in dance and a master's degree in exercise science. And my mission is to help yoga teachers feel more confident by truly understanding anatomy and physiology. I've been a yoga teacher and been studying anatomy and physiology for many years now, but I remember being a new teacher, not just of yoga, but also Pilates and dance. And I remember feeling nervous about injuring people in my classes, and I lacked the confidence in working with people with medical conditions. I always wanted to know the right way of doing a yoga pose, but I was also confused by the many differing opinions on what right was. Now, having learned what I've learned through science, I feel very confident working with anyone who walks through the door, regardless of their injuries, their nuances, or their medical histories. This podcast is all about you, dear yoga teacher, going through that same transformation from being confused by all the different views and opinions out there to becoming a flourishing teacher with the latest science-based information. This podcast is right for you if you want to hear interviews with the brightest scientists, the best yoga teachers, and the foremost rehabilitation specialists. Whether you're a new teacher or an experienced one, you'll enjoy learning from this podcast. So, it's pretty easy to find fear-based claims out there in the online world about the dangers of yoga, about doing this pose in a certain way and how it's going to injure your shoulder or your hip or whatever. But the scientific evidence overwhelmingly suggests that yoga is one of the safest forms of movement out there. Yoga does not lead to more injury than any other form of physical activity. And that's both in experimental settings, where you take a group of people, you randomize them, and some do yoga and some don't do yoga. And also in quote-unquote natural settings where, you just interview people and ask them about their injuries. So more specifically, a systematic review and 2 recent observational studies have all found that yoga-related serious injuries, as in those requiring discontinuation of a yoga class, they have to leave the yoga class, or discontinuing one's yoga practice, those are very rare. Instead, most yoga-related injuries are mild and transient, like minor strains and sprains. You don't get the major kinds of injuries that you would get with things like skiing, where you've got high velocity, potential for high impact if you run into a tree or something, or rock climbing, or motocross, taking your motorbike over dirt jumps and that sort of thing. That's where you can get proper injuries. We don't get those in yoga. Not to say that injury is impossible in yoga. No, okay, it is possible, yes. But it's important to put it into context of other forms of physical activity, of other forms of exercise, and also to realize the benefits of exercise in yoga, which I'm going to get to in a moment. So all of those studies concluded that given yoga's benefits, there's no need to discourage yoga practice for healthy or ill people. So, all physical activity carries some risk of injury. After all, it's physical. But yoga appears to be one of the safest forms of physical activity you can do. We're doing it in a slow, controlled way. The teacher is encouraging you to take variations as needed. It's a mindful practice. You're not competing against the person next to you as you are in a race. You're not racing to get to the ball. You don't have a major goal in mind. So it's not surprising at all that yoga is one of the safest forms of physical activity out there. Here's another thing to remember, and the science is really clear on this one. Overwhelming evidence shows that being sedentary, as in not moving, not exercising, significantly increases your risk of cardiovascular disease, also called heart disease, certain cancers, chronic pain, cognitive decline, diabetes, depression, obesity, osteoporosis, shortened lifespan, just dying earlier than you should have, stroke, and many other serious medical conditions. And we know exercise significantly reduces your risk of all of those things. There's been so much science on this. And exercise doesn't just reduce your risk of those diseases, but it also improves your life. It doesn't just take you from a -1 to a 0, but actually to a +1. It actually offers benefits to your life. We know physical activity significantly improves sleep. It reduces blood pressure. Physical activity and exercise reduce anxiety. They improve bone strength. They improve brain health and heart health. And there are many other benefits to remaining physically active. So helping others to be more physically active is well and truly a gift you are giving to the world. So go out with confidence, dear yoga teacher, and help make this world a better place by getting people moving. Let's not worry people and fearmonger about doing their chaturangas in this certain way. Yes, pay attention to alignment and follow the protocols of your practice. Ashtanga is great because it's a very small box to fit in. Your elbows are like this, your knees like that. Okay, great. It doesn't mean it's the only way of doing it. And what's most important is that people are moving, being physically active, and connecting with themselves. Now, if you might be asking, okay, well, how much exercise do we need to get those benefits? Every few years, scientists get together and they review how much exercise is needed for people to get the most benefit out of it. And they create the weekly exercise guidelines. These are created by the World Health Organization, and they have subsequently been adopted by many countries, including the United Kingdom, the United States, and pretty much most countries. Now, what are those guidelines? I'm going to quickly go through them, and then I'll go into more detail about what each one specifically means. So, the World Health Organization guidelines for adults in terms of how much physical activity they should get is 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity per week, or 75 minutes vigorous intensity activity, plus 2 days of strength training. Okay, so again, that's 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity activity. That would include things like going for a brisk walk, cycling on a flat surface, swimming, or even a yoga practice. Probably not a yin practice. That's a little bit too chill, but a vinyasa class where you're moving, you're strengthening muscles, you're increasing your heart rate, you're moving all the major muscles of the body. That, or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity activity. That would include things like, of course, high intensity interval training. It's written into the name, isn't it? Cycling uphill or cycling competitively, or lots of other things. Those are just a few examples. Okay. Plus 2 days of strength training. What is strength training? Well, most of us probably think of lifting weights, and that's a great way of building strength. But it can also just be your own body weight, resisting your own body weight against gravity, whether that's push-ups, pull-ups, lunges, all that kind of stuff that we do in a yoga class. Not pull-ups, obviously. And in fact, the National Health Service of the UK says yoga can fulfill those 2 days of strength training. Now, it's a whole different debate of whether yoga is enough to be your strength training practice, but we do know that moving your body against the resistance of gravity is going to build strength, okay? And it's probably good to supplement that with some weights, by the way. Okay, the World Health Organization also recommends these 2 other things. Number 1, reducing sitting time or sedentary time. So in other words, time of just doing nothing. Okay, so reduce your sedentary time as much as possible. And number 2, remember that anything is better than nothing. So even if you can't get to that full-on yoga class that day or that high-intensity training, even just going for a 10-minute walk outside is still going to have drastic benefits on your health. Physical health, mental health, even spiritual health. So remember that anything is better than nothing. And really, we should be encouraging others to stay physically active as much as possible. So that wraps up episode 1 of the Enlightened Anatomy podcast. I hope you've taken something from this and it's made you feel a little bit more confident and happier as a yoga teacher. Stay tuned for future episodes where, again, I'll be interviewing amazing people and sharing tidbits of information which are just going to totally help you as a yoga teacher. So I invite you to now press subscribe on your podcast player so that you can make sure that you hear about future episodes. And when given the option, choose to be notified for future episodes so that you can continue to hear from amazing people. Thank you very much for tuning in with me. And until next time, get enlightened and help others. Thank you.